There are so many people not sure about taking a Virgin cruise.
So join us in this video today, or we are going to show you all of our pros and cons about our recent voyage on board the Scarlet Lady.
So we're going to start today with the pros and then followed by cons, and then we'll discuss whether we would cruise Virgin again at the end.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion. We haven't compared notes, and we often disagree on our experiences on board a cruise, and I don't think this one's going to be any different. In fact, this one might be the most extreme differences of two different opinions you've ever seen. We were on the same ship, but I don't think we felt the same way about it. And Virgin kind of pulls that out of people. We hear the extremes about Virgin. Before we went on this cruise, this was our first Virgin cruise.
Right, but our 50th cruise, so we are experienced cruisers, and we've cruised most major cruise lines.
But before we got on, we heard everything from it's awful, do not do Virgin, to it's wonderful, it's a new, refreshing cruise experience.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk about our experience.
Yes.
And we'll see if you can learn something about your potential Virgin cruise.
Okay.
So
Good.
First, let's move on to the pros.
All right.
So I guess I'll go first with my first pro.
Okay.
And my first pro I have down, and I made all of this list when I was on board the ship, so I'd remember everything fresh. And I put down that the best pro that I found was the bar tab concept.
Oh, true. So Virgin Cruise Line does not have a drink package like most traditional cruise lines have out there now. They have what they call a bar tab. You want to explain what that is?
Yeah, bar tab is where you put money on a tab before you get on the ship, or just as you get on the ship, and Virgin will add additional funding to your bar tab depending on how much you put on. In our case, we put on $500 for our 8-day cruise, and Virgin added an extra $100, so when we arrived at the ship, there was a $600 bar tab waiting for us.
Right. And so that was between the two of us, and whenever either one of us ordered a drink, it was just directly deducted from the tab.
Yes, and the drink prices that you see in the menus around the ship are exactly the prices. There's no additional taxes or gratuities or anything added.
Right.
So if you buy a drink for $10, you look on your app, you can see $10 came off the bar tab. So it's very easy to keep track of, and the drinks, as soon as you order them, they do show up on your bar tab that's on the app on your phone.
Right. Yeah, so we did enjoy that.
And we like the bar tab concept because if you were a couple that one person drinks a lot and the other person doesn't drink hardly at all, then you drew from the same bar tab. You didn't have to worry about paying for a package that someone wasn't going to use.
Or if somebody had a drink, so the other thing about that too is that pop is included in your fare. And so if Mr. Canuck wanted to have a drink with lunch and I didn't, I could order a ginger ale and he could order a beer with lunch, and it was great.
Yeah, it worked out really well for us. And also, you didn't feel like you were drinking because you were trying to get your money's worth of a drink package that you had already paid for.
Exactly.
You could drink at your leisure. There's times where you might not feel like a drink in the evening. You might just want a water or sparkling water, because that's also included with your fare and not part of the bar tab. Or you might have maybe you have a less expensive cocktail. I might have a rye and Coke that's less expensive than, say, a big cocktail. So it worked out really well for us. We could drink in the pace that we felt was comfortable, and we didn't feel like we overpaid for a package that we really had to keep on drinking and drinking to get our money's worth.
That's right.
So that was my first pro. And what is your first pro?
My first pro would sort of be along that lines, in that there's a lot of things that are included when you get on aboard a Virgin Cruise Line compared to other ones. So like I said earlier, your pop and soft drinks are included on board. So is things like Wi-Fi. Your tips are included on the cruise. So I really felt like there was no hidden upcharge fees going on. We knew what we were spending throughout the cruise because most of it was already prepaid up front.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the pricing for a Virgin cruise versus other cruise lines, that it's a little more money, but that is because there is more included. There is the gratuities, the Wi-Fi. There's also, on the ship we were on, the Scarlet Lady, there was over 20 restaurants that were on board, all considered specialty dining, but it was all included in your fare. You didn't have to pay extra for a dining venue like you would on another cruise.
True.
So yeah, just about everything was included. You could go on a Virgin cruise. You could even go on there without a bar tab, and I think we would. And you could go there and not have just drink pop, sparkling water, regular water.
Absolutely.
We've been on cruise lines before where we couldn't even get water included in our base fare. Not the case with Virgin. You don't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
So my second pro that I had down was the cabin itself, and specifically the balcony and the hammock. So we had a balcony room, cabin, stateroom on this cruise, and I didn't have high expectations going in. I thought it looked too modern for me, too minimalistic, too much like IKEA, but I actually really loved the room. I was very surprised.
I really loved the cabin too, but the thing that sort of sticks out to me after getting off the ship was that I thought it had a really good shower in the bathroom. It had probably the best water pressure that we've ever had on any cruise ship. It was very spacious, and I thought it was very well designed.
Yeah, and that by the cabin, I think probably 80% of what I liked about the cabin was on the balcony, and that was the hammock. I thought the hammock was going to be a gimmick. I really thought this is Virgin's known for their hammocks, and we'll sit in it and get a picture and a selfie. Then you lay in this hammock and you fall asleep and you just fall in love with just out there drifting away, listening to the waves go by.
So comfortable, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We would fight over the hammock. It was so comfortable, and it was impossible. You'd go there with a book and sit down and think you're going to read, and before you know it, you're passed out. An hour goes by of your cruise, and you've just been relaxing.
Absolutely.
So I actually loved the hammock, loved the spacious use inside the room. There wasn't a couch, but there was a big chair and a table that you could move around and use with different parts of the room. Absolutely loved the cabin. Like I said, totally unexpected, but it was definitely so much of a plus that we used the cabin more than we probably would on any other cruise line.
And also in the cabin, there was plenty of storage space. I would add that too. The closet was very spacious.
Exactly. That was one of the things that was a pro that we didn't think was going to be a pro heading in.
Yeah. So my next pro would be the announcements. There are none. You're not interrupted on your relaxing sea day or enjoyable evening with somebody coming on the PA saying, this is coming up next. Join me on the Lido deck to do this, or come to this room where we're playing bingo. It didn't happen. It was so more, I don't know, chill and relaxing, not having somebody yelling at you over the PA on your cruise vacation.
Yeah, some cruise lines are famous for sometime in the morning, the cruise director comes on, they start literally reading the itinerary for the day. We have our phones, we have a printed out schedule that's in the cabin, and we know what's going on through the day that we really don't need to have someone go on for 15 minutes overhead talking about the events for the day. It was nice not to have that on this cruise. So my next pro was the elevators and the stairs.
Oh, yes.
So the stairs were huge. Like usually you're kind of squeezing through the stairs to let someone go by and that type of thing. They were huge. They were almost industrial.
Very spacious. You're right.
They were modern. They were they were minimalistic, much like the room and the rest of the ship. But they were so huge that you could go up and down the stairs no problem. It didn't matter if there was 5 people wide. You still had room to go down the stairs or up the stairs.
True.
And on top of that, not only were the stairs great, the elevators, I was a little skeptical, and because I knew the number of people on the ship, and in the past we usually have trouble with elevators and getting elevators. Not the case. I think the only time we had problem getting in elevators was during debarkation when people were trying to move their luggage.
Which, of course, is expected, for sure.
But other than that, there was rarely a time we went to an elevator, pushed the button, and it didn't show up in seconds, and very rare that there was an elevator that we couldn't get into to go, and there was often people not even in the elevator.
Yeah, very true. The one other little thing talking about the elevators that I really liked was when you were at a port, when you got in the elevator, the screen in the elevator would tell you what deck to get off of, where you are at the port, and all the information you needed. So emergency contact information, what time you needed to be back on the cruise ship. So I would walk into the elevator and just take a picture of all that information right there in case of an emergency. But it was so convenient that you were never confused as to how to get off the ship or what time to get back on, all of those things.
Yeah, and they were just regular elevators with buttons on the inside and the outside, so you can navigate where you wanted to go. There were no smart elevators where you're at the mercy of wherever it went, and it worked really, really well. Proof that a modern-day ship does not need the smart elevators. They can still function if you have the right number of elevators for the right number of people, and it did.
It did, for sure.
What's your next pro?
My next pro would be staff to passenger ratio. I felt like the staff on board there was plenty of staff, that we were never looking for a staff member to serve us somewhere, or that the staff that were there were working crazy busy because they were taking on too much. I found when we went to the galley and ordered lunch, as soon as I put my little flag up to order lunch, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, there was a staff member there. I felt like the service and the quantity of staff was really refreshing. Crew, I guess I should call them.
Yeah, and I would also have to comment, I agree with that. I didn't have that as one of my pros, but I think the other thing is the staff was generally very happy and positive. You never kind of ran into staff that they felt like they were just trying to get through their shift or whatever, that they seemed genuine and wanting to have you have a good time, help you out. And the staff as a whole was a positive experience, and never waiting for drinks, ever order a drink.
Right. The other thing I really appreciated was we've been on a lot of cruise ships lately, different lines, where you're around the pool deck or at the buffet having lunch, and there's staff coming around trying to sell you things like specialty restaurants or different events going on. There was none of that. There was no staff ever trying to sell me anything the whole time. There was a beautiful shopping area, but I was never felt like I was harassed in the shopping area or drawn into it to try to get pulled in. There was no people yelling outside of them trying to pull you in like we've seen on other cruise ships.
For sure. So my next pro is, it's going to sound strange because this ship has no children on it.
Okay.
It has free video games. There's an old school arcade. I think it's deliberately done old school. It's games that take you right
that
back.
we grew up with,
Right-
like Mrs. Pac-Man.
Right back to the 80s, right? With Space Invaders and games like that. And not only that, they have all these retro games. They also have retro music playing overhead from like the 80s and the 90s. It really feels like you're back in the arcade, back in the day that we weren't this old.
And the best part about that arcade is that it's included. You don't have to put a coin in the machine or swipe a card or anything like that. It's free.
Yep, all the video games are free. And I'm not sure if people realize that because it wasn't ever busy when we went in there. And
Right.
I think people maybe think they have to pay for this like on a normal cruise ship.
Well, I think we were day 6 out of 8 before we realized it was there and it was free. So
There you go. Free video games. What's your next pro?
my next pro is something that I maybe should have talked about when Jerry brought up his cabin. Is I loved that every day there was 2 bottles, carafes full of water in our cabin, and it was filled up twice a day by our cabin steward. It was refreshed in the morning and then in the evening when we were gone for dinner. I loved having fresh water at my disposal in my cabin.
My next pro is something to do with food, and we're going to debate about food because it was hotly contested.
Highly contested.
Between the two of us. But late night snacks at a place called The Social, I thought was fantastic. You could go there and you could grab popcorn, you could grab a hot dog, you could grab a float, you could grab candy. It was kind of a really nice, it's almost was like you're at home watching a movie on your couch, you get up and wander the kitchen looking for a snack. That's what it was.
It was, that whole area is a game area, and it was called the Social Club, and it really was sort of the hangout place. It was the one spot where they had TVs that people were watching sport events, but a lot of people were playing games, doing puzzles, all kinds of stuff there, and the arcade was just around the corner from it. Yeah, that was a cool spot.
What's your next pro?
My next pro would be the food in general. And so we're going to get into it now, guys, because I really enjoyed the food on this cruise to the point that I overate. I loved the concept of going to all these specialty dining restaurants, but I didn't have to pay to go to them, and almost everything on every menu was included. So I tasted a lot of things that I have never tried before, and with the exception of one item out of the whole week, everything I had was delicious, and I had a fabulous time trying new food. The quality of the food, in my opinion, was wonderful, and so the food overall is my biggest pro and takeaway from this cruise.
And when we get to the cons, then I'm going to talk about food because I disagree. But I will add some context to the dining experience on Virgin, and that is that there is no main dining room. Mm-hmm. It's all separate restaurants that you have to book dining times at. Mm-hmm. They also have a claim that they have no buffet, although I would argue that the area that they have...
They call the galley.
The galley is kind of like a buffet where it's all kinds of different stations and different types of food that are available, and people do serve you, and they serve you either at the station or you can sit down and like a waiter or waitress would serve you. Mm-hmm. So the food was, it was a different experience, and when we get to the cons, I'll explain what part of it I thought was a con.
All right.
Okay. My next pro, and I'm only picking off all the important things. You had a doorbell for your cabin.
Yeah, that was so important. When he first heard it, he didn't know what was happening. When we got on board on embarkation day, we were in our cabin for around 5 or 10 minutes when all of a sudden we heard this noise, and he's like, "What is that?"
Get ready. We have a doorbell. Have you ever had a doorbell on a cruise ship? Hello? Who's there? I don't know if she has her key. She might actually not be able to get back in.
You have to actually open the door when somebody rings the doorbell. I know, he's just left me out there, everybody. I said, "It's your doorbell. Go answer the door." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yes, it's your doorbell." It was our cabin steward coming to introduce himself. So yes, the cabins do have doorbells. Kind of unique.
Yeah, so there you go. That was a pro. What's your next pro?
I've gone through my list of pros.
Oh, really? So I get to have the rest of the pros.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of them you already said. One that you didn't say that I thought was very innovative was the use of the main theater.
Oh, okay, yes.
The main theater was not your typical seating and stage. It was that if they wanted it to be, but the seats would move around, they would disappear. It could turn into a big, huge, wide open space for like a rock concert. It could be turned into like a gymnasium where there was a center court and seats going up either side.
It was very inventive how they used the space, for sure.
There was even a spot that if they moved the seats the right way, that there was like a bar that you could walk up to on the floor level and order drinks. So it was very well done. I don't think I've ever seen something so creative in the space of a main theater on any other ship.
Yeah, very versatile.
And so they could do a whole bunch of different type of shows there. So I thought that was a pro for sure with how they use the theater.
Good one.
Non-smoking casino.
Ooh, I was just seeing that on your screen. Yeah, that's one I forgot to put on my list for sure. But yeah, I appreciated that. And one of the main reasons, if you guys have watched us vlogging, we're not generally gamblers because we're very poor at it. We've never had success, so we don't do it often. But generally, a casino is a thoroughfare to get to the theater or whatever, and you have to walk through the casinos. And that was the same on this ship. You had to go through the casino in order to get to the theater. And often the doors didn't open up till just before the show, so you were lined up through the casino. So it was very nice that if we were in a line for a half an hour, which we were lots of times, there was no smoking there.
Yeah, and it wasn't just lining up for the main theater. There was also a place called the Manor, which is like a 2-story venue where they would have the drag shows and comedy and different things like that. And so you'd also that actually came off of the casino.
Right.
So yeah, so it was nice that
line up there
it was a non-smoking casino for those of you that don't want to have to be in casino smoke if you don't want to be.
Absolutely.
And I think my last pro that I had that you didn't bring up was the option for so many grab-and-go food options.
Ooh,
so this goes back to the food again, but this was one of the positives that I found.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that under my food. You're right. There are, so as you're entering the galley, which Mr. Canuck refers to as the buffet, but it really isn't, in my opinion. There are these refrigerated stations there. There's some at the pizza place, and there's some at the dock house, where they have it stocked with fresh food throughout the day, and depending on the time of the day, depends on what it is. But there were things like charcuterie boards made up there,
fresh
salads, fruit.
Yeah, all kinds
sandwiches.
of different. Yeah, you name it. There was all kinds of different kind of continental type of breakfast type of foods plus continental lunches where it was
fresh fruit there. Yeah,
and it was available all the time, so you can walk by and grab a salad or some fruit or a nibble, and that was kind of a really neat option
and
to have.
In multiple locations of the ship. So yeah, we really appreciated that. And all those containers that you would have seen if you watched our videos, they reuse them. They wash them and reuse them. So very nice concept. Liked that idea.
Okay, so those were the main pros that stuck out in our head.
Okay.
And now we'll get on to the cons.
Okay.
We need some music right there. So since I went first with the pros, maybe we'll have you go first with the cons.
All right. My first con would have to be the embarkation. It is much later than any other cruise ship we've ever gone on, and so you have to log into your app months before going. For us, it happened to be, I think it was Christmas Eve was the day that we were supposed to log in and get the boarding time. Anyways, it proved to be very difficult, and when you did get a boarding time, it was later than what we've ever boarded on in any cruise ship. So we were at one point had a 4:45 boarding time to get on board the ship, but I kept trying it every single day for weeks and weeks, and finally were able to get a 3 o'clock boarding time.
Yeah, and this would actually be, even at 3 o'clock, the latest we've ever gotten on a cruise ship in our life.
Right.
Like, we were usually on one of the first ones before lunchtime, because we know that the first day is considered day one of your cruise. You've paid for that day on the ship.
We've told everybody, don't waste your first day. Well, you had to. And so what Virgin does, which is unlike what we've seen with any other cruise company, is outside of their cruise terminal, they have these lines where you would line up, and they had different time slots. So we had to stand in a line with everybody else that had a 3 o'clock time. And then people would be in a different line if they had 3:15 and so forth and so forth. And they let you in accordingly at that time.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely getting on the ship was felt awfully late.
So the whole point of why I was saying that is a con was that it did feel really late. And by the time we had a 5:30 dining reservation for that night, and we didn't get on board till 3:30. By the time you got your luggage and tried to get something to wear to dinner that night, it was so rushed. I felt like we missed half the day. I felt like we didn't have a time to explore the ship and get acquainted with the ship before we all of a sudden sail away was happening and our dinner reservation was going on all at the same time. So it made that embarkation day feel very rushed and confusing and not relaxing whatsoever. So I felt like we missed the first day of what I would normally consider my cruise vacation.
Yeah, we usually have lunch when we get on the ship. That's our protocol. We had lunch getting on this ship, but we didn't have lunch till 4 o'clock, and then we had dinner at 6.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit crazy. And in the middle of that, we were trying to find our muster station. So yeah, it was very rushed.
And unpack our suitcases and take part in the sail away. It was a crazy afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. So my first con was what I called inadequate number of dining reservations that were available. So because there was not a main dining room, you had to book your dining like you would, especially dining on other cruises, just so you weren't paying for it on Virgin. And I really felt that they did not have enough space in all these dining venues to accommodate all the passengers on the ship, because there was nights that we could not even get dining, at least at a time that we thought was reasonable, which for us reasonable is before 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
Somewhere between 5 and 9 would be reasonable. We could have got later sometimes.
Yeah. So for instance, we were on board for 8 days, and in those 8 days, we never had the opportunity to go to their Italian restaurant, because the only reservation I could ever find for dining at the Italian restaurant was after 9 p.m. And so we didn't want those reservations. So there were a few nights that we didn't have dining reservations because there was nothing available. And I spent weeks trying to get dining reservations leading up to getting on the cruise. Once we got on the cruise, I was able to get a few extra. And then we tried to get into line because they told us just go to the Italian restaurant and get in line, and if there's availability. We tried that 3 different times and were unsuccessful. So that was frustrating.
I think even people that like Virgin Cruises would agree this is a problem. And the reason I know they agree is because as soon as you're able to book that dining, people stay up till like 1 minute after midnight when they're eligible to do it. In the middle of the night, they're booking their dining because they know if they don't do it then, they're not going to get dining. Yeah. And if it's that desperate, then clearly there's a problem with the number of spaces available for people. You should not have to be up at 12:01 a.m. planning your vacation dining. That makes no sense to me. And
like I said, for us, just because of the time of year we got on the cruise ship, that opened up for us on New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. And of course, we were a little busy that evening with friends and family and totally forgot about it. So it was New Year's Day before I tried to get the reservations, and I was too late.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole booking of the dining is a mess. And they need to have more spaces if they're going to have that concept, in my opinion. So your next con is?
My next con was room service. We never could try and get it. We tried multiple times, and every time we tried to get it, it said it currently is not available. So we couldn't figure out what that was. But a couple of times, like on sea days, for instance, we thought, well, we're enjoying our balcony so much, let's just order room service and have lunch on the balcony. Every time we tried it, it didn't happen. We saw that there were room service bags throughout the ship, so some people were successful in doing it. But still to this day, I don't know when or the time, because we tried multiple different times during different days, and we were unsuccessful every time we tried it.
We're used to going on a cruise ship, and whether it's paid or it's included in your fare, room service is available most of the time on your app, or if it's not available, it tells you the times it was available. We had no idea how to get it. We do know how to get it. It was on the app, but it never was available at the times we checked.
Yeah, it was weird.
So, go figure. Next thing I had as a con was the scheduling for the evening activities.
That's one of mine too.
We found that there was for sure times where there was nothing going on. Like, I'm talking no musicians playing. There was not. Maybe there was a game, there was some kind of trivia or something going on. But we're used to always having some kind of an entertainment option, whether it's a theater or there's a musician somewhere you can listen to. That type of thing.
You're talking in the evening.
In the evening time, yeah. That the scheduling was really off. That there was monstrous gaps. We'd actually go back to our cabin and say, okay, there's nothing going on now for 2 hours, and we'd stay in our cabin waiting for the next event.
Yeah, and we're talking like between the hours of 7:30 and 9 sometimes. It would be a really dead time, and you're all dressed up, we just finished dinner, but there's absolutely nothing going on. There was no live entertainment or shows or anything at that point. So yeah, what do? We often did go back to our room and watch a movie.
And I think part of the reason for that was the activities they did have going on a lot of times, their signature events in the evening, didn't start till 11 o'clock at night. So what you would normally see at 9 or 10 o'clock at night on a normal ship, and you'd be able to kind of fit it into your evening, you were waiting for the night to go on before you could finally see it happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we found. So, I mean, it's okay if you're one of it probably works out really well for you if you're used to having dinner at like 7:30, and because then by the time you come out of dinner there will be stuff to do, but because we tend to eat at 6 p.m., by the time we were done dinner there was nothing going on. So it was kind of it didn't work in our schedule of what we're used to. We're used to being on a cruise ship where we have dinner at 6 p.m. and then we go and listen to a comedian or go to a main theater show or listen to live music, and we found most nights there was very little option to do any of that.
For sure. I can definitely throw this out of our routine for what we're used to doing on a cruise ship, for sure. Yeah.
We would have to stay up late to go do the things we wanted to do, which we did. Sometimes we were going into the shows or the events at 11 p.m., which isn't normally our thing.
No. My next con that I have is the lack of pools and hot tubs on at least the ship we were on, the Scarlet Lady.
We're agreeing with more than I thought, so I have that down as one of my cons too. I felt like being on the Scarlet Lady on a Virgin cruise in the Caribbean, that the ship was poorly designed for the Caribbean in that there was small pools, very, very small pools in my opinion.
Not enough pools.
And not enough of them. And not enough deck space for people to be able to have a seat or a lounge. So we really, really appreciated that we had a balcony, because there was multiple times that we tried to be on the main pool deck and were unsuccessful. And so we retreated back to our private balcony.
Yeah, and I think that Virgin's known for getting a little bit, excited and over the top at different times of day, and the pool definitely, the volume level, the music, all the craziness kind of ramps up in the afternoon, which is fine because we've seen that on other cruise ships where things start going, the hairy chest competition starts going and the belly flops and all that stuff. But what we've usually done is we find it, a deck up or somewhere else farther away from the main pool on the ship. You can find a lounger and relax and kind of get away from that.
Find a quiet area.
We've never really found that on Virgin, that it was either you're in the middle of all that, or you're up on a deck that was so high and so exposed that it was so windy and so sunny without any shade that you couldn't get up there and enjoy some quiet space.
So the only compromise to that was we did find deck 7 was a promenade deck, and there was some nice quiet lounging areas there, which was beautiful and relaxing, and we did use that a lot. But the downside on that, there was no water there. There was no pools or hot tubs for you to enjoy. So that sort of took away from you wanting to be there. If you're in a Caribbean cruise and you want to either get in the pool to cool down, that wasn't an option.
Yeah, and the main pool that there was there, you might see it in some of the videos. What you need to know is that's not the size of the actual pool. That there's like this walking ankle deep water area that's at least half the size of what the pool is.
At least.
And the pool is actually this small little rectangle in the middle of that pool.
I would call it a plunge pool. Never once did I see anybody swim. We just saw people standing in it because there wasn't room to swim. It was a plunge pool.
Yeah.
Both of them.
And you have another con?
Well, yeah, let's see. So the other one, kind of goes back to our cabin. We loved almost everything about the cabin, but the one thing, and we had people warn us about this, is that they have very hard mattresses. So if you're used to keep sleeping on a comfy bed like Princess is known to have, or Holland America, then that bed might be an issue for you. Here's a little pro tip. Ask your cabin steward for a mattress topper. We were advised to do that, and that helped quite a bit, but it was probably one of the hardest beds we've had on sea.
Yeah, for sure. My next con, I guess I'll dive into the food again on why I think it was a con.
Okay.
I believe that I like simpler type of foods. I like, stick to your ribs type of food. I like a good chili or a stew, or I like some pasta with a little bit of chicken. All that type of food I could not find on this cruise ship. In fact, there was a lot of dining venues that I would go and look at the menu, and you're used to seeing a red meat, a fish, a chicken, and a vegetarian dish. That chicken one that usually is my go-to was almost never there. I think there was once or twice on the ship I was able to find chicken.
It was very rare to find chicken. There was a lot of lamb and of course a lot of seafood, which I loved, and probably why I really enjoyed it, and a lot of steak and that sort of thing. So it definitely was more catered to my taste when it came to diet than it was to yours, for sure.
Yeah, if you like home style type of foods, then I think you'll be like me and you'll struggle to find things. There were some menus I would look at and not have any options, or maybe one option I would kind of be happy with. But usually I'm used to going on a cruise and just overeating and having so many options and being so happy about the food selections. I did not feel that on a Virgin cruise.
Whereas I did. I definitely overate on this cruise, so maybe I shouldn't go back on, because I found the food was amazing, and there was lots of times that there was, so many appetizers that I didn't know which one to order, and the waiter would bring me multiple ones, and everything was so good. The shrimp on that I had throughout that voyage, I ate so much shrimp because it was delicious.
Whereas I think I lost weight on this cruise.
Not me, unfortunately.
Well, what was your next con?
My next con would be the shows repeating in the main theater. So we were on an 8-day voyage. There were 3 main shows that repeated throughout the cruise. So if you already saw the show, then you really didn't have anything to do in that evening. So we did see the 3 main shows, and I enjoyed them all. They were good quality, really talented performers, and the quality of the performances were great. But just the point that there was, like a lot of cruise lines, they may just have 3 main shows, but then they have a special performer coming, like a special singer or something like that in the other nights, whereas this wasn't the case. And so I was disappointed by the main theater lineup.
And the next thing I had as con was, and this is general for the entire ship, and I might take some heat for this, I feel that the entire concept of the ship was fashion over function. And by that I mean there was seating in spaces where the seating made no sense. You would sit there and you would face an elevator bank, for example, instead of face the performers, or you'd be facing sideways instead of the performers that were set up on a stage that was over here. I feel that, everything was nicely decorated on the elevator banks and stairwells, but good luck at finding a map to know where you're going to get anywhere on the ship. You're used to seeing a map out of an elevator bank. Did not see that as well. So there was a lot of fashion over function. Even some of the seating was a little uncomfortable because it was meant to look good, but it really wasn't good to be sitting in it.
Valid point.
Valid point.
I would say that, overall, when there was live music, the venues, the amount of seating that they had for people to sit and actually see the performers were few and far between, and you had to get there really early. Like, we actually started sitting in the venues an hour before we knew the musician was going to perform, so that we knew we'd have a seat.
Yeah, and good luck finding a bathroom. If you knew where they were often a long ways away. Sometimes you'd walk the length of a whole deck to find a bathroom, which I've never seen on a cruise before.
And very few. Like, you would go into the ladies' room and there'd be 1 stall, maybe 2 if you were lucky, but very small bathrooms compared to what most cruise ships have. Yeah,
for sure. And one thing that kind of irked me a little bit about design and setup of the ship is there was these TVs all around the ship that were in, like, beside lounges and in hallways, and it was literally advertising for Virgin Voyages over about future voyages, or it was about ports of call, or the new ships that are coming out.
Or excursions.
It was like a non-stop, battering of advertisements on screens, and it would be inappropriately placed at times. You'd be in a lounge listening to a band, and there's these flashing 3 screens beside you that are showing advertisements as you're sitting in this lounge.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's true. They didn't come over the announcement and bother you, but those screens were definitely, they sort of took away the ambiance of the venue that you were in.
Yeah, for sure. You have another con?
My other con is sort of going along to that lines, is we love live music on a cruise ship, and there's nothing better than a live band that's talented, and then you can get up and dance. That wasn't an option on this cruise ship. There was not a dance floor in any of the venues where the live bands were. Now, there was one night in the main theater where the actual show was like a rock concert, and the whole area you could dance, but it was a rock concert. It wasn't, we were on a Valentine's Day cruise. We were listening to some lovely romantic music on Valentine's Day. All I would have loved to do was to be able to dance with my spouse at that point, but there was no place to do that provided there. So that would be my thing. They did have a DJ in the club later in the night, but I'm talking live music and dancing, it didn't present itself.
Yeah, picture the main atrium on other cruise lines where there's a band or music playing and people get up and dance. That was not anywhere on this ship.
No.
So another one I have, and I think this is one that a lot of people have been waiting for us to talk about, so we might as well get into it.
Okay.
And is that either it is chill time on this ship, or it is party hard and like over the top. And I think that felt like a con to me, even though you had both options.
Okay. Explain.
My reason is that because I feel like I'm in the middle, that I don't want to like a really boring, quiet cruise where nothing's going on. I might get a little bored. I also don't want it being over the top where I feel way too old to be on the cruise ship, which I felt at times on this ship.
Okay.
I kind of like that middle ground where there's a little bit of dancing happening now and then, a little bit of activity where you can do something and keep yourself busy, but not so much over the top that I feel like I just need to back away because it's getting out of control. I felt this ship did a really bad job of giving me that middle ground, and that might not be a con for you because I think that's really a personal choice thing. That my sweet spot for how I cruise did not align to how Virgin had the atmosphere on the ship.
Yeah, I could get that. I mean, there were very relaxing times, especially in the mornings on that cruise ship where it was our style of cruising. And then in the afternoon, it got a little busy and enjoyable listening to live music on a sea day, having sangria together. That was beautiful. But you're right. By 9 o'clock at night, it was crazy. Yeah.
For sure. And I don't think I've ever seen as many Speedos as I've seen on a ship out of North America as on a Virgin cruise. So I'm used to seeing that on European cruises, but not so much out of Florida. So that was kind of a surprise too. But it was just that kind of crowd. It was kind of out there, literally. What's your next con?
That's it. I closed my book. I'm done.
Oh, you're done? We don't want to close on Speedos. I guess the last little con was they seem to like lines, or queuing as you call it in the UK, that we had a problem with lines here and there, whether you're getting into a venue that you even had pre-booked arrangements at, or if it was a dining venue that you had arrangements, you always seem to be waiting in lines. I'm not sure why it needed to work that way.
Yeah, so just for an example, most of our dining time was at 5:45, and the restaurants didn't open up till 5:45. So if you got there at 5:40, all of a sudden you realized that you were lined up behind 100 people that also had the 5:45 dining time. So yeah, there was a lot of lines, and that is definitely a negative. I don't want to spend my vacation standing in lines.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so. But I think that's it for the cons. You're done yours, I've done mine. So now the question that we all want to know, I guess I'll put you on the hot seat first.
Okay.
Would you cruise on Virgin again?
Yes, I would. I would do it again, mainly because I loved specific things about it. Number one being the food. Enjoyed our cabin. All of the pros that we said at the beginning of this video, I felt were enough that would make me want to cruise it again. And I think I learned enough about how things are done with Virgin that maybe I would avoid some of the late night parties that we tried to attend because we wanted to see what it was like. I'd be like, it's not my thing, and I just wouldn't bother. And so I know that I could go on Virgin and be fed wonderfully and have a fabulous time, go to great ports, and have a great cruise, and I don't have to be a part of some of the crazy that goes on.
There you go.
Would you do it again?
Would I do it again? I would only do it again if you made me go because you wanted to go. Like, I really feel that it's not my cruise. I really feel that part of the cruising experience for me is the food, and I was very disappointed with food going in. Part of my experience is my kind of routine in the evening where we can get up and have a dance and go listen to some singers and catch a show in the evening. I felt that wasn't there for me as well. So I'm not sure if the positives of the cabin and the positives of the drink package and a few of the things that we liked with the ship outweigh the fact that it really disrupted the way that I cruise. But to be fair to Virgin, I think that's the intent, is they're trying to provide a different type of cruise experience.
I do think that, yeah.
And if you're not a stick in the mud like me that likes to do crazy different things all the time, it may actually be your cruise and you may enjoy it more than other cruise lines. So,
and you know what I think? So we did this cruise by ourselves, which we enjoy cruising by ourselves, but I think that maybe if I did Virgin again, I'd like to go with at least another couple, because of when we talked about the downtime after dinner and before there's other entertainment. It would be nice if you had another couple that you were cruising with that you could just hang out in a lounge and have a drink and talk, or play a game of cards if there's no other entertainment going on. So I think it would be a good cruise for us to do again if we had another couple that went with us.
There you go. So I guess in summary, that means that if you have a cruise line that you love and you have sailed on and enjoy, I'm saying stick with it and don't try Virgin. You're saying if you like to try new things and you want a different type of experience and you're kind of a little more adventurous with food, then give Virgin a try. I guess that's the answer we're giving you.
I agree. Is it the perfect cruise line? In my opinion, is it the one that I want to go back to all the time? Not necessarily, but did I have a great time? I did, and I would be willing to do it again.
There we go. No comment. I'm glad you had a good time.
I did.
So that's what we thought of Virgin. And if you have any more questions about Virgin that we didn't cover in this video, then throw them in the comment section below. We're more than happy to help you out, provide the answers that at least we have available based on our experience.
We'll let you know who's answering so you can know who's giving you what biased opinion. We've had some people already say that they think Jerry's telling the truth and I'm glossing over it. I really do believe we're both telling you our truths.
Yeah, and like what someone said to us before we went on there, they said, go on to Virgin with an open mind. I agree. If you have a Virgin voyage booked, give it a try. Go in with an open mind, see what you think. Maybe it's going to be your thing. Maybe it won't be. It's not a bad enough experience that it's not worth trying once.
There's a lot of high quality things going on there that you will enjoy, I think.
So thanks for watching. And if you haven't seen already, our Virgin vlog series is already out. We spent 8 days on the Scarlet Lady. You can go back and you can see day by day everything that we did throughout the adventure.
Yeah.
So take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.